And we're going to turn now to Beto O'Rourke because he has now joined that very crowded field. He is now a 2020 presidential hopeful, and he is already in Des Moines. We're going to go there in just a moment. But first, take a look at some of his announcement video.
The challenges that we face right now, the interconnected crises in our economy, our democracy, and our climate have never been greater. And they will either consume us or they will afford us the greatest opportunity to unleash the genius of the United States of America. In other words, this moment of peril produces perhaps the greatest moment of promise for this country and for everyone inside of it.
And as we said, he is already campaigning in Iowa. So let's go there right now to Des Moines. John Verhovec is there. And John, you are there because he is there campaigning already. And he's going to be introducing himself to a lot of people.
That's right, Gio. I'm actually here in Fort Madison, Iowa, which is in the eastern part of the state. And you're right, Beto O'Rourke finally ended months of speculation this morning, and he jumped in the presidential race. He's the 15th Democrat to announce. And it's really interesting to look back at his rise to this moment. Most people know Beto O'Rourke. He was a 3-term congressman from El Paso, but most people know him from that Senate race last year against GOP Senator Ted Cruz in Texas. That campaign really vaunted O'Rourke into the national conversation. His sort of off-the-cuff style really kind of endeared him not just to people in Texas, but people across the country. And I think he kind of went on a soul-searching trip after that race, and ultimately he and his wife Amy decided, look, I think the best way that we can serve this country is to run for president. And he really ran down this morning a list of policy issues that he is going to focus on in his campaign: healthcare, combating climate change, immigration, and he definitely seems like he's already comfortable on the campaign trail. He had one stop earlier today in Keokuk, which is down the road, and you saw him there kind of, taking off his jacket, rolling up his sleeves. And you're right, he needs to introduce himself to voters here in Iowa, because even though he is in the national conversation now, he still has a long way to go to really endear himself to people here and become a real contender in this race, which, like I said, already has 15 major Democratic candidates, Gio.
John, stay with us because I want to bring in our Deputy Political Director, Mary Alice Parks. Mary Alice, how is Beto going to distinguish himself here? Because John just talked about it, 15 candidates now.
He brings a lot of young energy to this race. It's a personality that we don't have represented in those 15. He's good at inspiring crowds and ginning up sort of inspiration. He's been talked about as an Obama-like figure in that way, his ability to work a big room and get everyone up on their feet. But now he's going to have to prove that he can also campaign on a national stage. It's really different to run against Ted Cruz there in Texas, and now he's going to have to run against fellow Democrats, and some of those Democrats who've been running for quite a long time. Elizabeth Warren got in at the end of last year, and she has a whole team working on rolling out policy proposals. She's kind of a professor, we know, and sort of a wonk. He's going to have to stand up next to that, and it's going to be a change for him to not just be able to rally the crowds, but to have to position himself next to his fellow Democrats.
And Mary Alice, I'm glad that you brought up Ted Cruz, because that's how a lot of people know of Beto O'Rourke. They looked at his close loss there in his Senate race there to Ted Cruz. It was a close loss, but still a loss. So is that going to hurt him?
It totally could. There's going to be a lot of people that look at his resume and say, the last thing we heard about you was that you lost. But there are others that are going to remember the money that he was able to raise from around the country, really historic amounts of money there in Texas, and that he was willing to take a pretty progressive message to Texas, of all places. He got young people in Texas excited about the possibility of voting for a Democrat. And he's going to use that to his advantage. He's going to say, look, I am not scared to take this message to any part of the country. And that's something that Democrats have been grappling with. How do they take their message to places that traditionally Democrats haven't won?
All right, Mary Alice, I want to ask you about the national emergency vote in just a moment. But first, let's go back to John in Iowa, because John, I think the star of the show, at least according to social media, really has been Beto's dog, right?
That is very true. If you read that Vanity Fair article that came out yesterday. Some beautiful photography by Annie Leibovitz, but it seemed like all anyone really wanted to talk about was Beto's dog, who seemed to know something that we didn't. He had kind of a worried look on his face, but still very loyal, obviously. But it's things like this where you never know what's really going to go viral on the campaign trail, and I think this is just an indication of that. It's sort of a silly thing. But that's the thing with Beto, is that a lot of people like him for his authenticity, for the fact that he doesn't hide, some of the other parts of his life. He brings his family on the campaign trail. He brings his family in, and does all these live streams and shows behind the scenes, and that's something that a lot of people like about Beto, and I think that's going to be something we're going to see continually throughout his presidential campaign, Gio.
All right, John, thank you so much. The dog is not shy. Thanks for joining us there in Iowa.